Every Caribbean person, after an attempt has been made to reach his culture's origins, will find himself on a deserted beach, naked and alone, coming out of the water as though shivering and shipwrecked, like the Spanish man, without any identification papers other than the uncertain and turbulent memorandum inscribed in his scars, tattoos, and skin color. Finally, every person of the Caribbean is in exile from his own myth, his own mystery, and also from his own culture and his own being, now and always in the world. He is simply a Panyaman. This is an excerpt from a book by the name of The Repeating Island by Cuban author Antonio Benitez Rojo, which, believe it or not, I read after finishing my video on tourism, where I more or less use the beach as a strange metaphor for the psyche of Caribbeanness. I used it as a metaphor, but everything that I said there was true. I really hate the beach. I really did almost drown 3 times. And I did write both that and my very first video essay on beach resorts I was forced to go to by my family. But what a perfect visual to describe the truly fragmented and contradictory, vacant but vast richness of Caribbean existence. I just made 2 videos, believe it or not, which were related, that I had really been wanting to make for a long time. Tourism and Spectacle was a video I made which begins as an exploration of the inherent corruption of the tourism industry and becomes truly a story about my own strained relationship with my heritage and the sort of strange, contradictory existence of Caribbean people. It is actually the spiritual successor of an essay I wrote on my short-lived blog. It was about culture and whether or not it is necessary. Current me would call most of that post racist, especially because I was compelled to write it when I saw a clip of one Uncle Thomas Sowell proclaim that black culture didn't exist. I didn't necessarily agree with the sentiment, but it compelled me. I hadn't considered that idea before. But this essay, which became the tourism video, adds a lot of much needed material context as to what plagues our attempts at cultural expression. Then, when the algorithm admittedly didn't treat the video as I'd liked it, I came up with that silly video about context. After such a depressing video as Tourism and Spectacle, I wanted a little change of pace. I rarely just allow myself to be a silly billion here. Believe it or not, this was another idea I'd had for a long time, actually predating my blog. This particular conflict is what I plan to elaborate on for the next arc of my channel. One thing I realized immediately as I got back to school after my hellish summer was that a part of why making videos, especially the type of videos that I make here, had been, or at least become, so difficult was at least partially because of this fundamental existential conundrum. Identity. Who I am, where I come from, what I'm supposed to do, and how that affects what I say. What I'm supposed to say. You know, I don't know any other Jamaican people in this space doing the types of things I do, and I'm sure I'm the only voice a lot of you watching have of Jamaicans, particularly when it comes to discourse about art, and probably just in general. And that feels very... there's a lot of pressure. I know a few people here with Jamaican/Caribbean heritage who live overseas. I know there's Foreign who's Bahamian. I actually had him take a look at my script to see if there were any notes. That was good. And there's also Anjoism, who is Trinidadian, I believe. And they make more overtly political stuff than I do. My tourism videos may be my most outwardly political video so far. But there is an inherent contradictory confusion that comes with Caribbeanness, and I was reminded of it when I went back to school because I go to a Caribbean university with Caribbean courses, and of the courses that I do acknowledge this conflict head on. See, when I do philosophy courses, the thing that most people here probably call philosophy, we call Western philosophy, which we study along with African, Indian, Chinese, and Caribbean philosophy, all at the same time. When I learn about film history, I learn about the many ways that the concept of a history of film can be examined. In all of my humanities courses, I find myself being taught several different things at the same time, which are all inherently contradictory and at odds with each other, but each of these things is fundamentally important to my context as a Caribbean person. Every course I do has the subtext that we have to be reconciling between several different identities which are diametrically opposed, but equally necessary to our place in the world. They all have this inherent sociology baked into it. Critical race theory is a thing that is controversial in American schools for some reason, but here we have no choice. The population is literally descended from slaves who were brutalized in the most horrific ways possible and raped by their masters. We have a lot of herbs and spices in us, and post-independence we've kind of been left to figure out what the hell to do with ourselves. But our overseers still do clearly have their preferences. Much of the confusion and weight I often feel writing these media discussion things is because I am attempting to examine things from this very messy, very confusing, very contradictory perspective that is my own, and I'm also young and confused and autistic and anxious. Being chronically online this summer truly damn near killed me. To illustrate what this looks like, I plan to self-publish my own graphic novel work very soon, and if and when I do, it will inherently become a part of the canon. Whatever it is, however it looks, whatever the story is about, it will become a fundamentally essential part of Jamaican graphic novel history, purely by virtue of existing. The trouble with this and Jamaican cinema is that we're very much still in a developmental imitation stage. All art movements and artists have to start with an imitation stage. Film and graphic novels are a language that was developed elsewhere, so to create our own form, there is an inevitable period of imitation that must come first. The trouble with our local cinema, besides the fact that we get absolutely no support either from the government or patrons, is that it's sort of been stifled. The Harder They Come, which I mentioned a bit in that tourism video, was the very first feature-length Jamaican film from the early 70s, and does speak quite specifically to certain issues which existed at that time. Jamaica had been independent for all of 10 years at that point, and the brazenness of the social stratification was more pronounced. It remains relevant because the core themes of it are still very real, but it is still very much something of its time, and every Jamaican film that's been made since has either imitated what it did, following the same tropes, and those which have been different have either been compared or just follow it, or at least attempted to follow the conventions of Hollywood, because we're not Hollywood. We neither have the resources nor societal context of Hollywood, so they all sort of look and feel cheaper. Shotas gets a shot in my video. The movie isn't that good. It's sort of following in the tradition of The Harder They Come in the commentary about how the social reality due to injustice and government corruption brings crime, but it's clearly just a cheaper looking version of Scarface. It's become iconic though, and some scholars may throw dirt on its very indulgent, misogynistic, low-key racist elements, but its existence and visibility has solidified its place in the Jamaican cinematic canon. Then there is the problem of visibility. There are many great Jamaican films, short films of course, that have sort of been trapped in this purgatory of the film scene. Most of these works get shown in festivals and kinda rot there. I went to a screening a couple years ago I only knew about because of my prestigious ass university, and the films there were really, really good, but they physically cannot be seen unless the director is directly screening them to you in a festival or some other kind of bourgeois film event. No way to stream them legally or illegally. Of course, they'll never be shown in our cinemas because they won't make money, so they're just trapped in this web, and I don't blame the filmmakers, because I don't think they're setting out to gatekeep their art. I mean, these things are usually made with the hopes of furthering their careers and visibility, but the industry is just so troubled, which is a large part of why in my video about white guilt cinema, I do suggest that the best thing we as Jamaicans can and should do with our films and art in general is to make things with what we have, and as much as possible make them freely available to be seen by any means necessary. The whole technology is the way of the future argument troubles me, which is why I do worry still about how that video's ending might potentially be interpreted, but that's really what it is for me. We've been kept from these things so far. I don't think we can afford to play by the same rules. Like, what I do here could be called a form of filmmaking, and my stuff is being seen by people because I put it up here. I truly think that's our best bet at being seen or getting support at all. I think about these things because the thought has occurred to me to put up some of my more ambitious video essay ideas or even short film ideas and show them to festivals to see how they would fare. But that would likely mean that no one would be able to see them besides those festival people who probably aren't even the people I'm making the video or film for in the first place. And that's the thing, you know, truth be told, had I come from the context of like the US, I may not necessarily say that. I might just say show your films in your local communities, make little collectives. Actually, I say that for Jamaicans as well. I've been growing to appreciate the value of in-person community myself. But the trouble with us is how divided the nation still is, and how troubled the art scene is. The film scene, and really art scene in general, is filled with these very well-intentioned but hyper-privileged upper-class people. Whenever I go to these arty local events and such, it's always a certain demographic of people who all talk perfect English and tend to be lighter-skinned, you know. You know you're in the Jamaican bourgeois when you start hearing English and seeing at least two white people. I want as much as possible to never have to gatekeep my work from the regular people of Jamaica, and the material way to do that is to make it free. But my crisis now is that I talk English and talk about foreign media all the time. You see what I'm talking about here? The next arc I'm doing will be zeroing on the inherent complexity and often contradictory nature of trying to exist in a world that's at odds with your existence. Though admittedly so far the algorithm hasn't been liking it.
Manley's blamed for caring more about third world ideology than about paying the rent.
This is also why I want to start promoting my Patreon more and uploading exclusive, though I think inconsequential things there. I don't want to gatekeep my art too much, but I do also want an incentive to have people support me. I don't want to be as dependent on the algorithm. I really just want to put things into the world that I think are good or genuinely will add some value, and I just don't think that's something I can do while having to worry about the whims of the robots, you know? The next planned video isn't even necessarily about Caribbeanness, but neurodivergence and queerness and the nature of reality and what it is and isn't. I want my videos to start getting really weird like that, and I don't always know how that will do sometimes, you know? I'm shilling again. For real though, I just wanted to talk a bit about these two videos I made and what the next handful of videos on the roster may look like thematically. I didn't bother with the question and answers this time around, partially because I think my last one of those was too recent, partially because the questions I get are never actually about the videos, but I'm cooking. I plan to get this next one out before the end of the year, fingers crossed, but I also don't want to kill myself over it like I did with my Orson Welles video last December, but that did end up being my favorite thing, video or otherwise, that I've ever made, so let's see.